Howdy, howdy, world. This is Ray Roberts, Raymond K. Roberts, and so here today to talk about an interesting thing that came up today. We're living in a world right now where it seems like everything's up in the air, everything's going on, everyone's asking questions about why, and people are saying they're explaining themselves, but it just opens up for more questions. So I was curious today. I came across something that I wanted to talk about, and the topic today is rules to protesting. Yes, I admit I chose a catchy title, but no, we're not going to talk specifically about rioting. We're going to talk more about the more direct things that the larger aggregate. Most people are not going out, doing things that maybe they shouldn't be doing. So I wanted to open up a discussion today about a flyer that I saw online through Facebook where, and let me go ahead and read this so I don't mess it up here, but it's showing that this was handed out to individuals who were part of a protest. So it was protest etiquette for white folks. So naturally, the idea, just to keep this in the context, if we come back later and we're sharing this to our grandkids, right now, the America is having it's a little bit of friction going on right now along racial lines, but we'll get into it later. But I honestly feel it's not really race, even though we talk black and white. I really think it's more about culture. Old versus new, maybe is one way to say it. So what I am viewing here is we're having a world right now where there's lots of protests. It started off with, we don't always agree on what it started with, but let's just say that there was a gentleman who the police, they murdered him. Flat out, he was murdered. So there was a response initially in the area, the neighborhood where he was at, in Minnesota or Minneapolis, and then it kind of grew across the country. And as of this moment, it is a worldwide event that's happening right now at this time. So you have protests in over 100 cities all over the world right now. And let me just first put that into context. I want to say 1991, 1992, a gentleman by the name of Rodney King, it was captured on video of him being beaten by several police officers from the Los Angeles Police Department. That event, once it hit the public, it picked up steam, and there was 6 days of rioting in Los Angeles over this incident that happened to this one man. Now, even then, the conversation was about, while it started because of this one man, it wasn't because of one man. He represented something. When people from certain parts of the world saw something, they saw a human being attacked, and they didn't like that. But for another smaller segment of people, when they saw that video, they saw themselves. So that was one city for 6 days. Fast forward to today, we're in 2020, and one man was killed. It was being videotaped, not just by one person. Everyone carries a camera in their pocket nowadays. So everyone has one. So this was streamed live in some cases. People were going Facebook Live. So the result of that was what I'd like to talk about today is where Rodney King was one city. With George Floyd, we have hundreds of cities all over the world. So where one police department in one city and one mayor had to engage this idea or this topic or this issue, you're now seeing mayors, police departments, and governors all over the country of the United States having to address this. They're having to put out statements, and not just government, even businesses are having to put out their official statement on where this stands. So that's where we're at right now. So what I wanted to start the focus on today is, it's always about solutions, analyzing from a technical point of view, talking about the impacts of technology on society, and coming back to that comparison between Rodney King and today, how because everyone's got a cell phone, what made this different, if it is different? And what what does this result in us as we become more connected? So I'm gonna read off these one, two, three, these six etiquettes for white folks for being a part of a protest for Black Lives Matter. Now this is an official BLM list, but the idea of a black man was killed, this is racial profiling, equal justice for all in the situation. So that's what we're going to go through. So number one, it says, so basically it's written in a voicing, I guess you could say. Yeah, okay. It's written in a voicing of from a white person to a white person. So it says, number one, some chants are not for us. And it gives examples, I'm thinking. Hands up, don't shoot. I can't breathe. And then in asterisks, because this is not a chant, this is an action, raising the black power fist, which I find we're going to definitely go on that one. Number two, don't lead chants. We may join them, not all, see above. So you can't join the three above. Look to black voices, elevate them, and amplify them. Three, do not escalate things. When we incite law enforcement, it will disproportionately harm black folks and people of color. I think, oh yeah. Okay, four, allies to the edges. Put your body in between black folks and law enforcement. Five, get off of your phone. Do not post photos. Police and white supremacists use social media to target protesters. And then six, don't talk to the press. Direct them back to black organizers and protesters. So that's the list, and we'll go through it again. But so yeah, I saw this being passed around, and I thought, let's talk about this list. Feel free to put any comments in here. If anybody wants to come on here and speak, send me a message. I will definitely put you in on the stream here. And yeah, that's what I wanted to go through today. So until then, I'm just going to go ahead and jump on this myself. So let's start with number one. Some chants are not for us. And it talks about hands up, don't shoot, I can't breathe, and raising the black power fist. I think I want to take the last one first. So what I think about is, I think it was the 67 Olympics, where two members of the United States track and field team, they decided to protest by putting on a black glove. Turns out they only had one pair. One of them couldn't find his gloves, so they both split the pair of gloves. One had the left, one had the right, and they chose to protest. I don't know if you've ever seen the story, but there was a third guy on the podium that day, and he was aware of what was going on. He happened to not be black. It's a pretty iconic photo. If you haven't seen it, go look at it. And I find it is a very interesting story following the three men. Indeed, it was a different magnitude of effect for those various men, but for some reason, general history teams seems to forget that third man, that white man, he did not get off easy per se. So I guess I say that to say, I never viewed the it is a black power fist, but for me, it's more about power to the people. So if I see a white guy say power to the people, I'm not offended. I might make a joke like, you already got it, bro. But a white guy saying power to the people, I'll be honest, I would be more offended as a non-island black person. or if I have island roots, I don't know about it. I would be more offended if some white kid came up to me and said, Buffalo Soldier. I'm like, what are you talking about? That would actually get me worked up. That would get me worked up. Or if, I'll even go even further. White kid come up to me with dreads talking about, he started singing Marley songs. I'm like, what freedoms you fighting for, bro? So that actually is a higher level of what are you doing for me than just some kid going, yeah, power to the people, man. Because, maybe we all don't agree, but white people are people too. So that statement on its own, I don't see the beef with it. So if I'm sitting there and I put my fist up and some dudes stand shoulder to shoulder with me and put that fist up too, we're good. So my boy Trey just came on in. What do you feel about that? I'm saying that white folks are allowed to throw the fist up. How you feel?
Word. Okay. First of all, how you doing, Raymond? It's good, man. Good to talk to you, man. Good to be here.
You as well, sir.
Yes, man. Yes, man. So I think one of the main differences and where that's specifically coming from, I hear your argument, and I would tend to agree with that argument from an ideological, conversational basis. This is specifically very on the ground. And the more I thought about it, I made a comment earlier that was saying that, you're a military guy. I know you from my time serving in the military, short though it may have been. In my opinion, civil organization, what we would call like social justice movement, but not just organizations and NGOs in themselves, but the actual, like what we're seeing on the ground, which usually tends to have a lot of pre-planning and organization. There's a whole lot, whole organizations and networks of organizations in different social justice communities come together to facilitate these on the ground movements. And the difference between a civilian version of organizing versus when you're in the military, well, first of all, everybody signs on in the military. At least they do now. Second of all, we have a chain of command and we have a very rigid and strict organizational structure. And if that isn't enough, we got the good old UCMJ. So there's policies, procedure, there's everything in place structurally and organizationally to ensure that the focus of missions and the focus of people's efforts and missions are very exactly what they need to be and not less and not more. In a civilian situation, what you have is anybody can see the protest is going on, see the flyer and say, hey, I'm going to go and show up. And their intentions can be A to Z. And I think that what this is intended to do is call and curb the potential. Of course, again, it's civilians. You can't tell anybody what to do. You can't police anybody who shows up for movements or whatever. But I will point out that this list is sort of responsive, I would say, from what we've already seen in many movements and any on the ground actions. For people who stay on the ground or are focused of doing the work on the ground, this is the stuff that they see. They see voices coming in, co-opting the movement. We see people, what we call, there's this expression, taking up space. There's a whole lot of taking up space that happens in these organizations.
Hold up, because let's give the people some context.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
I have never taken part in a protest.
Okay.
And I allege, I don't know the future, I allege that I never will. I'll let you speak for yourself in response to that statement.
Fair enough. And that's okay. I
think you're the opposite, but maybe you don't. What do you think in response to me saying that?
That's okay. There's no judgment there. And I'm not saying...
I mean, for the people to understand, like, you are a guy that will go out in protest, correct?
Okay, so to give some light background, so I have I'm not going to call myself the uber justice warrior or whatever. I've made a few choice opportunities to make sure I was there when it needed to be there. I flew to Standing Rock during that Thanksgiving protest where they were, the militarized police were out there doing their thing. I was in Cali during the Occupy movement. Occupy Oakland was one of the most severe iterations of that movement, and I was there for that and saw the goings on there. I went to DC and I was in DC for the Women's March and the inauguration march. Remember the Pussy Hats everything. I was there for that. And part of that was also because of me going to Standing Rock. I sort of, and different different organizing events, I plugged myself into the groups and figure out where to go and where to be and what's popping. I don't particularly have any specific judgment for you for not being on the ground, like doing.
No, that wasn't the point of it. I mean, I don't got feelings anyway, so you'd be wasting your time. No, I just want people to have a scoping of, we are both military men. That's where we met. And we are both Black men. I argue we are both consciously aware of being Black, but it manifests in different ways. So put it this way, I love football, but I'm never going to be sitting in the stadium at negative 15 degrees. I will never love a team that much. So I can appreciate a guy saying you ain't really a fan, if he felt that way, but I know the game and stuff like that. So I just want to point out that as we engage this, I just want people to know they're getting some overlap. We have some things overlapping with the military, but at the same time, we have different experiences since then. So what I really want to get into on the protesting is, I 100% agree with you that as we move through this conversation, there is no binaries. There is no all of them. There is no never. There is no always. So while we're talking about this flyer, no, it did not come down from BLM Central. All the Black people did not get a text message. We did not vote on this in Black Parliament. So we're good on that. So whenever we're talking about them, we're speaking solely from the mindset, because we don't know who did it. We're trying to hypothesize or try to figure out the pathology of the mindset that created the document. So to your point, absolutely, we can assume that maybe they went to some things beforehand. So some of it's learning from experience, but I think that's what we're probably going to be going back and forth on today. How much of it is based on anecdotal experience? How much of it is based on, evidence-based reasonings, and how much of it maybe is based on some feelings? That word I love using. So
feelings.
Everyone's got those feelings. So, okay, Black Power Fist. So I work from the bottom up of number one. So you heard me saying it. The fist itself, where do you stand? A white person is standing next to you in that crowd, and they throw that fist up too. What are you doing?
Okay, so let me preface by saying this about the entire list. I understand very clearly the spirit of where all of that comes from. I don't necessarily think every line item of that is like vital, but I do think that the general gist of the totality of it is to say, there's a meme. There's a wonderful meme that I wanted to find and share. It shows, it's not a meme, it's actually like a illustration, if you will, like a political cartoon, like a graphic, if you will. And it shows like young white progressive person holding his sign and about to go out and do his thing and represent for the movement. And he's talking to his mom, and his mom is dressing him up and fixing him up before he goes out. And she's saying, all right, son, remember when you go out, listen to Black leadership and, And yes, that's exactly the sentiment that is being conveyed with that document. Now, again, we can hash out the line items of where each little specific thing is either appropriate or not appropriate. But more than that, I think it's more important to validate the context of the spirit of the message, as opposed to, say, every letter.
See, when I read that, I felt there was again, when we're using proper logical approaches, Hanlon's razor. Instead of assuming malice, at most, let's assume ignorance. Now, when I say that, doesn't mean the other person is automatically ignorant. Could be us. So let's start with ignorance. Us not understanding or them not understanding, or a mixture of the two. So I would say what I'm perceiving is in that spirit of number one, someone is saying, don't co-opt something that's not yours and don't appropriate. That's the vibe of, okay, I think that's what you're trying to do.
Correct.
Okay, so I'm good with that. So I just want to talk about, is that really, if a white guy does that, is he really taking something that isn't his? Now, like I can see, again, white boy got the Jamaican accent, but he's from Ohio, and he's sitting there talking about the man oppressing him and everything, and talking about how he's a Buffalo soldier. Yeah, I got it. Him, I'm like, bro, I need you to like move a couple bars down. You smell like garlic. So give me a couple stools. But I don't see that as taking something from me when someone says power to the people standing by me. In fact, I argue that's what I want. I want you to be next to me. Go ahead.
So if I may, now you chose a very interesting saying to riff on, power to the people. That wasn't actually listed in the list, because technically power to people is all acceptable ones. Let's look at the ones that, so I had to pull it up so I can read along with you what they actually said. Or it says some chants are not for us, and these are the ones that they included. It says 1, hands up, don't shoot.
Okay.
2, I can't breathe. And 3, it says raising the Black Power fist. So let's examine those.
Now we did quotation for a reason.
Well, no, I say
don't say it. That's my point. Are we the only people with a fist? That's what I'm asking. Are we the only people with a fist?
Well, the fist is that's almost a conversation into itself, as opposed to who owns. I mean, I think there's a whole lot of history and a whole lot of context that makes that either true or not true. I don't think we have the time to really get into that, but let's look at the 2 easier versions if we can.
Okay, and fair enough.
What this does, in fact, is I was smiling a minute earlier, because I think for many a moon, I've listened to you denigrate the validity of feelings, with the quotations, feelings. And there's been a moment that I've been waiting on all this time to inject the validity of feelings.
Okay.
This may be that moment. So
I'm already feeling bad for you already. Go ahead.
You know what? Dealing with you, Ray, one thing I've come to appreciate is it's okay to be wrong. So I am totally okay for correction.
I'm just going to get this just in case we need it.
Okay.
So just in case we need it, I'm going to break this glass, okay?
Right on.
Just in case. Go ahead. I'll keep it right here.
Okay. So let's look at them. So hands up, don't shoot. And I can't breathe. For a white person in this particular case, to say I can't breathe is to give voice. Now, so it's happening on a couple levels, right? This is a white person at a protest with the intent of standing in solidarity with, but the chant that you echo reflects that you are also a victim of the cause that you are standing for, which is in fact not the case. And I think the point of this is to make the distinction. And then the question becomes, why are we making this distinction? Who's at benefit? Who's it for? And who's at, and the first thing off the top of my head, without thinking about it too much, it's for the feelings of the Black folks that are actually there protesting for their own rights, who do feel a kind of way. Because when does anything but feelings get protest done? Like, action on the streets doesn't happen until people get pissed off. So what I'm trying to go ahead.
I do go with feelings a lot, but if you really look at what I say, my issue is not feelings. My issue is actions that are driven by feelings.
Okay.
So we're humans. We're not machines. So when we get into this, I hear you. But let me talk about my feelings. I want a white guy that when he sees a Black guy have something happen to him, he says, you did that to me. I want that. I put it this way, bro. If you do something to my brother and say you didn't do it to me, you about to learn something today.
Mm-hmm.
You trying to explain this got nothing to do with you, you're separate human beings. We're about to pull the bus over, bro.
So you're kind of contradicting yourself from my perspective a little bit, if I could illustrate that. So it would seem as though what you want in your heart of hearts is for people, white people in this particular case, who are down, quote unquote, down for the struggle, to be motivated by their feelings of solidarity, such that there's no separation between me and you. Here's the thing. While I do want that level of severity of allyship and solidarity, it's possible, and I know people, it's very possible to have that degree of severity of solidarity, without you identifying or making it seem as though you are identifying with my struggle. Those are actually two different things.
I agree they're two different things, but I think it's on your perception of it, because I think when I say I want someone to see me as their brother, that's not a feeling. That's a logical thing here. When I'm in the Army, there was country boys, we were not friends at all. But there was a logical component that said, when we go out there, it is in everyone's best interest to keep it real in the field. So right. Now that, and that's something I often talk about, where a lot of people say, I need to change my heart, then that will change my words, then that will change my actions. No, change those actions, and that will change what you say, then that will change your heart. So for me, that's not an emotional logic that I laid out there. That is logically how most people do change. You don't start loving people you've never spent time around by just loving them, then going hanging out with them. You first interact, and then it works backwards.
So there's a term that's used in social justice communities, and there's a bit of, you got to do a bit of class, because there's lingo, there's terms, terminology, there's all this kind of stuff. So in social justice circles, they'll talk about centering, and that's another component of this whole thing. We're not just in a protest setting, but just pretty much in practically all settings, where it's an issue where sometimes white folks or folks that are not identifying personally with the struggle may enter the arena and center themselves, as opposed to center the movement and the folks that are most affected by it. Now, I would argue or posit that in this case, you're kind of doing that. You're kind of centering these white folks who want to be a part of the movement. Or you're playing recruitment sergeant. And the whole point of that thing is already for people who have signed on.
See, what I see here.
And here's the difference. The difference between, and why I love every time you bring up a military analogy in this particular case, is because it's not the same thing. Those white boys from Alabama that you was in the foxhole with, they signed on. Not to mention UCMJ is right behind them to say, if you're not down with this shared fate, this shared cause, there's everything about the military that reinforces that. There's nothing about civilian organization that reinforces that. So you never know who you're dealing with. Is really the issue.
So I'll continue forward with military examples, but I'll use asymmetric warfare so we can shut that one down, because guerrilla attacks and asymmetric is all people. So that'll be easy for me to tear apart. But I want to get into what I'm hearing you say about what white people can and can't do. For me, that is the equivalent when I talk to a white person dressed the way I'm dressed, talking about my life, and they say, what about black on black crime?
Right.
What about abortion? That's not me, bro. I can imagine there's a white person who's like, I hear you. The older white lady who was a hippie in the 70s, who some kind of way ends up leading all the songs, I'm not her. I'm not her. The girl who's working on her thesis in college, and that's why she's dating a black guy, I'm not her. The dude who did a couple missionary trips with his father to Africa, so now he's woke, I'm not him. I can see a white guy saying, I'm not them. So we're not saying they don't exist, but I'm trying to focus on the possibility that there is a white man who's not them, who's not trying to run the show, but he's there genuinely. I argue it's possible. So what I'm talking about is, and let me make this even cleaner for us. I think I'm not going to fight on the hands up, don't shoot one. And I don't know logically why I'm not willing to fight that one. But
because
I can't, but I can't breathe. Put it this way. It wasn't me getting choked out, but it felt like it was me getting choked out. So I'm okay with a white guy saying, when I watched that, I saw a man walking down the street. Then the next minute he's being killed and I saw me. I'm okay with him taking it personally. I'm okay with that.
Fine. But here's the thing. You are fine with that. And you are not, I mean, on many different counts, not necessarily the average black man or not the, I mean, and neither am I for that matter.
I was gonna say, let's say I'm not. I don't know if the guy owes the average. Let's talk about the average black man. Does he owe the average black man something?
No, but see, this is the point. This is about centering the white folks who want to be a part of the movement, which is basically what we're doing in this conversation. So then it comes back to, who is that designed to benefit? Who does that rule number one serve or intended to serve?
Actually, we can go even bigger. Someone wrote this thing. Who is better off? Let's just say hypothetically, all the white people read this thing and say, "Okay, boss," and then they apologize because that was a pseudo reference to something that their people didn't go through.
So what about it?
They say Boston, Masson, and then they have to apologize for that because that's not a joke they're allowed to tell.
So look at that. Look at what you did there. So because black people have been actually subjugated and actually had massive, whatever relationship, we can make jokes over 500 years of actual oppression so that when a white person has to literally follow rules that they didn't meet, somehow we can equate that as somehow the same thing. Is
that what we're doing, or is that a choice of interpretation? I'm willing to take that as the communicator. I should accept that risk that someone could perceive it that way completely. You don't owe me taking it how I meant it, but I'm asking you, do you have any level of responsibility for how you perceive things? Or is it solely from the communicator?
Fair. But I guess the point of where I was going with us not being typical black men or whatever, I probably shouldn't even have said that. What I really wanted to point out by saying that was to say that people on the ground, for example, I sent you this video of this lady who was very eloquent and talking about how the reason why they're looting and they're rioting and they're breaking shit up.
I watched it once you said it's got 1.4 million views. And before you get into it, I want to say it still links. So you're not changing the subject, but again, it's my solution tech thing. So
no, go ahead.
Everything we're talking about right now is network theory. These are feedback loops. So think about a conversation between two people. This is a system of you're communicating something, but there's an environment in between. From your brain to your mouth, there's an environment, and from your mouth to the person's ears. Meaning, let's say the thought is 100%. There is a degradation from your mouth, then there's another degradation to the person's ears. Then there's another degradation from the person's ears to the person's history, their experience, what they've gone through. So when you think about communication, when we were kids, remember that game Telephone?
Telephone, yeah, playing telephone.
And if there was enough kids in the room, the message would get completely convoluted.
Yep.
Even with just two people talking, that is the equivalent of playing telephone with, let's count it, brain, mouth, other ear, their brain, then their experiences, and I just should have put the other person's experience. So even just one-way communication, that's 6 different telephones that things are going through. Key and Peele had a great skit where they're texting, and one guy is just, whatever, cool, man, yeah, let's do it. And the other guy is getting mad, like he's ready to fight, like he wants to get violent, because he thinks the other dude is just putting all this animosity behind it.
Yeah.
And that's, and it's a great skit because that is how people are. So even when you mentioned about maybe you shouldn't have said it, part of something that I've learned to engage in critical conversation and debate is to turn that off, to turn off that mechanism, because I have to ask myself, what good would have come from engaging it? It's not that I didn't hear it. I just have to ask myself, what do I care about? What am I trying to get done here? So please believe, my friend, I heard the comment, but I came into this saying this wasn't about me. I fight the idea, not the man. So what I argue why that applies here is I'm trying to understand this system. And what I'm really trying to understand is I know the in-between is degrading the communication from brain to brain. We don't got that mind meld thing going on.
Right.
So I am trying to do the part that I can to use better words, to use a calmer heart, to help us think a little bit better. So with this message here, coming back to network theory, the fact that someone got outside their house and showed up, that's the physical connection there. They're there with you, okay? But I'm also looking at the time that someone had to put in to make this piece of paper. I do find a little bit of irony in a we're all equal freedom movement that has different instructions for different people. Because I'll tell you this right now.
Isn't there we are all equal freedom movement? Can we back that up? Walk that back?
So a freedom movement where everyone gets treated the same.
Is it that? Is this what we are saying? Is the point of this, whether I'm Standing Rock or any particular cause, is it a cause? Because again, we deal with Black Lives Matter and we deal with people saying all lives matter, right? So we deal with a marginalization by the struggle by relative universalism, you know? And so what that does is dilute the potency and the validity of the specific aim of why we are here. So in any particular given, unless it's just, Greenpeace getting together to say, hey, we are the world, that's 1%, maybe if at all, of actual movements and protests like what we're dealing with now. And so, I mean, I would refer back to Standing Rock.
Well, hold on, I'm getting lost now. So I didn't say all lives matter. I said the point of Black Lives Matter is that Black lives are not being treated like other lives. So the goal is to be treated like other lives. Or are we saying? Are we agreeing with that or no? Definitely. Are we want to be treated better? Or?
But this isn't about. You said this is a equality. Everybody get treated the same movement. Yes, in the global sense. However, this isn't about. Well, okay.
I see what you're saying. Let's rephrase it. This is about Black people are not being treated like everyone else.
Correct.
So Black people are handing out flyers.
Here's the funny part. I wouldn't even necessarily check this out. Now we're gonna give you a little ingrowth. I'm gonna flip on myself a little bit. Not flip on myself. It's not myself. It's just the environment that I've seen. The social justice environment is a very interesting one. Let me just say that. I find it personally to be rather anti-male and in some cases can also be racist, can be anti-Black, even though they fight for these causes and stuff. I would not be shocked in the least bit if a Black person did not write that.
Oh, you know what? I need to back up because I think I said that earlier. It's written in the voicing of a white person. So I guess what I'm saying is, if there's a concern about co-opting, if I was out there, and we already said I probably wouldn't be, but if I was out there, I would be telling my white friends, throw that in the trash. Now, again, what is that worth? Because I said I wasn't going to be out there. But one of my white friends came back.
You're looking at white ally. You're looking at true allyship and nothing else. And this isn't about protecting true allyship. The fact is, and this is the point. So we have words like snowflake and we have all these kind of things, which I don't really like that political usage of the word, like sort of like turn it into I don't know, a 4-letter word in a regard.
Oh, I love the word snowflake, but I'm usually using it on conservatives.
Well,
Go ahead.
you love it. I would say that you love it because you reappropriate it, because it came from the folks who tend to be on the other side. You know, it's a
True.
I think you actively reappropriate it, and that makes it cool. So I'm with you. However, there's a point about this, about being let's apply the term snowflake to this arena, to this realm. This is not about protecting white allyship. White allyship or non-BIPOC, let's be correct, non-BIPOC allyship, true allyship, we don't need to treat them like snowflakes. You know,
you're saying that someone really down for the cause won't be bothered anyway, so there's a moot issue.
Or even if they are per se bothered, but they can at least humbly submit to the rules and regulations of this mission and what it takes and what we need from you from this specific mission. Now, that's really aimed at, it's not aimed at those white allies. And by the way, those tend to be more few and far between. And what you more tend to see is agent provocateurs, people who go in there just for self. I mean, hell, just the people. Now, Miami is I'm hailing out of Miami, Florida, for everybody watching. We are a very unique American city in terms of our diversity. I use a term that some people may or may not like, called proxy whiteness, which is to say we are a town that is mostly run by Hispanics of Cuban, Latin American origin. And white folks don't really run this town. They do, but they don't. It's really like Cubans and Latin folks that run this town. Now, a couple of things. Miami's version of these protests, I have a good friend. I didn't put boots on the ground there this time. I did not. I have a good friend who is a photojournalist, and he was there to document the event. And his imagery is up. A lot of the images you see there captured by him. I asked him, how many black folk was really out there? And he was like, you know what? Yeah, some, not too many. And then, I go back to like the first version of this wave, if you will, of these killings. To me, started with Trayvon Martin. That's my backyard. He was from Miami Gardens. He got killed in Sanford, Florida, outside of Orlando. This is my neck of the woods. His mother's running for city commission now. I remember the movement that came from that, and where it was and how it was and who was there and where it was. And that was definitely a movement that was in the hood, so to speak. If you're going to say in the hood, you know where they wanted the first version of these protests in Miami? In a little neighborhood called Coral Gables, on a street called Miracle Mile, which would be the Miami version of Chicago's, does Chicago have a Miracle Mile?
We have a Magnificent Mile.
Magnificent Mile. You get it?
So I get it. I guess, first off, let me ask this. Who is they? Who's the they that wanted the people trying to organize it?
Exactly. And that's my second point. My second point is, you can look this up. Now, I'm not saying this representative of the whole. There is an organization, an interesting scandal that has erupted in this whole thing, where we have a organization called FemPower that is headed up by this Dominican young lady, organizer, social justice, whatever. She was organizing money for the bail fund for people who got arrested. She was one of the bail fund folks. She was directing, using her organization for that. Well, she was recently outed as being pictures surfaced of her with President Maduro of Venezuela. And a whole host of implications and concerns about the allegiances and who's really what the real thing is kind of come up. So yeah, there's just this really thing in the social justice circles, especially in the protest circles, of you don't know who.
I think I'm getting what you're saying. And I agree with you. It's not the military. It's not hierarchy. There's not generals. There's not colonels. I think a better one is protracted warfare.
Okay.
So where there's a cause, but nobody is in control of anybody. Okay. What's up, man? So just to catch you up, we're talking about this flyer that was floating around online. It's for the protest. It's
Okay.
protest etiquette for white folks. So these are white people who are allied to the cause. These are the rules for them. Okay. So just so you have it, I tagged you on that one on Facebook.
I saw the image. I saw like all the rules, all the ground rules and stuff like that. But you know, honestly,
so right now the one we're on is number one. Are they allowed to say the same things? Are they allowed to put the fist up? So I just conceded that I have to stop using conventional military references. So I was about to lay in on asymmetric warfare, where even if you have an Osama bin Laden, he doesn't actually control everybody. And in fact, that's why they call them cells. They often don't know what each other's doing. Yeah, they might see each other now and then, but it's a flat organization. So even though they all show up at the same place, maybe sometimes ain't nobody really telling anybody what to do. It's almost like a Ouija board. You know, everybody's got their hands on this thing, but where it's going, who knows? I think half the people show up just to find out. So
can I why that doesn't seem to work either? In my just off the top, these folks have a share still, whether they don't have they may not have the hierarchy and the enforcement of the hierarchy, but they certainly have whether the cultural, ethnic, or otherwise like tie that binds.
You think there's no culture that's tying the protesters? No culture at all?
No, because well, again, there's an assumed culture. That is, so in America, we have this thing where people exist in 4 to 5 to 6 different cultures at the same time. So intersectionality is really the issue. In Afghanistan, intersectionality is much, 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 much less. Yeah, we agree?
Yeah, because they don't move around as much. But again,
other things they don't have
to Afghanistan. People, I mean, a woman is also a daughter, is also a wife. You always are in more than one circle, and they always will have overlap and a confliction. So someone could be a progressive, they could align with that. Someone could be a social justice warrior, but you don't have to be both of those. I consider myself left of center progressive. I'm not a social justice. I'm not going out there. I'm not carrying no sign. That's not me. But there's overlap in certain places. I am fight with economics, but I am not support black business. And let me clarify that before people start flipping out. I'm not going to pay $20 for a half-eaten hamburger from McDonald's just because it came from you. I support business. So when I say I'm going to build up black businesses, for me, it's like trying to counteract the fact that we have a long history in this country where, here's a simple analogy, white person, black person have the same credit score, okay? They have the same credit score, but they're getting a different interest rate.
Sure.
That's the kind of stuff I want to go out. What I'm not interested in, I'm not interested in taking a guy with a 400 credit score and treating him like an 800, black or not.
Fair enough. But I think it's a little odd that you would presume that the black business is going to have the half-eaten McDonald's burger. I don't know.
No, it's not a presumption. It's experience. 15 years of business experience. I'll tell you this right now. That is not the usual, but that is a very prevalent thing. And I'll tell you another group. It's not just black business. Also musician guilds. You know, before I sold out, I was a musician. They'll have these music groups, right? Where, you know, us musicians need to stick together, you know? Right. But when you go into the room, it's all a whole bunch of support local music, bro. Buy my CD.
Right.
But what if it's trash? Oh, so you don't support music. I support good music. That's what I support.
So that's a good analogy. I'm gonna let Sam hit it right after me. But the reason why I think that's not necessarily a good analogy is because those people, those musicians, they are individualists that may find power or agency in a group setting, and so they're going to utilize the group setting as an agency for their individual aims of success or whatever. That's
and
not what
there's a lot of black people who do that through these organizations.
I would argue too, but that is not what protest, like on this protest level, I don't think that's what's happening. That's not.
You just said there's people trying to co-op for themselves. The white lady trying to take over the Kumbaya drum circle and everything. She's there for herself.
Well, what I'm saying, I don't see black folks doing that. I don't see black folks using the move that, for the movement. Unless we're talking about your Jesse Jacksons, your Al Sharptons, those folks.
So the black dude running out of Nike with the shoes, he's doing that for.
I agree. No, I'm with that. No, I agree. That is a capitalization.
Yeah.
What you got, Sam? I'm done.
I was gonna be like, hold up. So here's my takeaway on that. Because I looked at it a second time while you guys were talking. Honestly, and this was what I was thinking, is that this would all make sense if the leadership and the hierarchy of these movements were a bit more organized.
Right.
I get that I get that this is a civilian organization, a civilian movement, and you're trying to keep things as simple as possible. But that's one thing I kind of worry about with this. And because one of the things, at least in general, that I feel that's a big issue with the movement is that they really haven't separated themselves or set themselves clear in what they only have. So the only thing they clearly mention is we're against police brutality, or they haven't. I don't see clear demands apart from that, specified commands apart from that.
Let me just say, I'm just glad you're on here, Trey, because otherwise people will be thinking this is the Candace Owens show. Maybe. So ain't none of us down with Candace Owens, no matter how we're talking.
Oh no, Candace Owens, I fucking hate her.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm for them. And the thing is that, don't get me wrong with my criticisms, but I'm for the movement. I just want to see more organization.
No, I like how Sam hit it, bro, because he basically is saying that you can't have it both ways. You can't say we're not organized like the military, then hand out some damn orders.
Right.
I'm not saying, it doesn't have to be tough either.
Sam, if I may, I would address this. I would say that, to your point, I would say that part of your analysis is perception, and I would say it's half right, half wrong. There is elements of disorder. First of all, the reason why I am sort of skeptical about the top level of this whole movement, knowing the typicalities, like, for example, you working with the military, you have a sort of gauge of the, for example, degree of agility that you can move with, or that the military moves with or can move with. If they seem to be able to run like Usain Bolt one day, and then the next day it's Flash, you're asking yourself, well, how did all of a sudden we get so much done and so much organizations coordinated at the same time in a matter of literally seconds? And that part is a little skeptical to me, but I'm gonna leave that alone. But I will say this: with so many organizations in so many cities and movements, and of course there's loose networking and connected. I've seen cities, for example, I think I saw in Detroit, where they have a 10-point plan, and it's actually very organized, very thought out, whatever. Other cities may not have that. So, and then there's
thing too, coming back to network theory. Mm-hmm. Just because someone doesn't have the power doesn't mean there's not people competing for it.
Okay.
So I hear what you're saying. It's a civilian thing. There was no formal people's army, but that does not mean there's not organizations vying for quote unquote control. And we actually started individuals. It might even be a smaller level. Your local group protesting. No. And there's that one guy where it's like, who is this dude telling everybody what to do?
I'll take it further. The organizations themselves. So what you can also tend to see is professional protesters, not just, folks getting $25 an hour ads off to be Antifa from Craigslist. Not just that, the off the street guys. I'm talking about whole NGO presidents and officers of these organizations who organize these things and have nothing to do and get their money and their bread and butter by finding the next protest and the next thing to organize.
The other thing too with that, go ahead. Actually,
no, I can say just that, not to say that they're by default disingenuous, but there does lend a door opening, a crack for some disingenuous behavior and thought.
Yeah, because I mean, the thing about it is that everything has its purpose. I mean, from because I'll say that as far as organization, I don't know if this was intended or not, or if this was just a side effect. But some of even the rioting and looting, which I don't condone with, first of all, so everybody knows that, it seems like that actually fell into play I mean, it fell into play with what's going on, because some of those elements led to massive change.
Mm-hmm.
Because it showed that, hey, this may not be something we want to deal with. This may not be something this like, because, and it also put another thing too, when you see like the different demographics too, the demographics play into that, because it also makes people think twice about, rather than like, because when it's just a bunch of minorities or just a bunch of people of color, they may be okay, hey, we might just go ahead and like shut this down, like lay the hammer down on these guys. But when it's multiple people like that, when it's multiple different personalities, you got, okay, this may be my daughter, this may be my child, this may be a family member, a friend, somebody that I know directly.
Mm-hmm.
And that changes perspectives, and that adds one thing that's very important with a lot of these things, especially when you're trying to get the appeal of the general public, which is relativity. Yep. Relativity is going to be very, very important.
But
and I think
because what I'm trying to point out here. Imagine there was a protest about, you know what, Italians are getting the raw end of the deal. Because Columbus did bad things, now we're saying all Italians are bad. There's like this revolt, okay? And we go to, actually, let's do one more realistic. I actually saw something today about Indians saying they want a piece of the action. Basically saying this freedom, equality movement, we want in. And I actually wrote on Facebook, I'm good with it.
Native Americans, you mean?
Yeah. So okay. If Native Americans, so if there was, let's say there was an event and Native Americans were like, okay, we're going to chant crimes were committed or something like that, whatever their chant is. But because the specific crimes we're talking about were not committed against you, don't chant. You just stand there quietly, but stand there with us. I would be like, that's kind of weird, bro. I mean, I'm saying we're brothers. So what they do to you, they do to me. And you're like, nah, son, we're cool, but we ain't brothers.
That's exactly right. So getting back to the point I was trying to make about who is that intended to serve? Who does that first line item and the whole thing of it really, who's that trying to protect? And who it's really trying to protect is, going back to my feelings, the feelings of people, Black people who either on the street or not on the street, but particularly the ones that are on the street, because that's an on the ground memorandum. That has nothing to do with ideology. That has nothing to do with Facebook discussions. That is a literal, we're in the foxhole and this is the rules of engagement in the foxhole.
So what I hear from you, man, you're not seeking like a full brotherhood. You're more seeking a confederacy.
No. Well, I'll let you expound on that and what you mean by that. But I guess
a confederacy is, we don't actually owe each other. We're not one. But when it makes sense, we align. It's almost like a syndicate. You know, so like business-wise, a syndicate, none of these companies are beholden to each other. They don't owe each other anything. They're not legally tied. Lloyd's of London, syndicate.
Mm-hmm.
The separate insurance companies, they have just chosen, to your point, a list of etiquette.
Mm-hmm.
But they ain't tied to each other. If what happens to one of them, they're not saying that happened to me.
Different level of severity, therefore not really a great analogy, because you're talking about people who are, if you want to use a stratification, an axis of a middle point of stasis, and people moving positive in life versus people in a negative side of that stasis and trying to work to stasis. This is talking about people who are in the negative part of that axis trying to work towards stasis, not people who are already doing all right and trying to do better. It's a different attitude.
I don't see any logic in that statement at all. You're basically saying that rules don't apply if you're doing well in life. You're gonna have to say it, bro.
What I'm saying is allegiances can be more lax when you already cool. And if I got a house and you trying to link up with me so we can get a mansion. Yeah, we don't got to be.
That's timeline, bro. They did not start out easy. They started with those rules from the beginning. That's how it started. Lloyd's of London, that example I gave, a syndicate. A syndicate is not, we're doing this because we're gravy. The whole reason for collectivizing or organized because you want something you don't have. I don't care who you are, whether you're at the bottom of the bottom or you're some small company trying to compete against Walmart. So there's something you want that you don't have. That's the point of anything, whether it's a police union or whatever. There's a reason. So no, it doesn't matter what level you're playing at. That's just magnitude.
I would disagree. I would say that having personal agency is the gateway and the doorway to be able to do anything syndicated or collective or in this regard. Even when you talk about like the mob or, you know, syndicates on that fashion, organized, whatever, these are folk that, one, also shared fate. They are, there's no much, I should say much less degree of variance and diversion from us saying we people, we people, and this is why we're sticking together. Usually that's the basis. The fact of having this shared fate, this assumed shared fate, whether it's because we're all Italian or because we're all business, you know, whatever it is. I think we're neglecting the level of when an individual does not have personal agency, and that person and that fight on a collective level for an individual or a set of individuals to attain personal agency. So now to talk about the Native Americans, it lets me underscore a point that about all of this, more than just the rules of engagement. I think that to truly be an ally, and this goes for Black people too specifically, I think that everybody should be, and I actually took this from you, Raymond. You know, we're all supposed to look after the less fortunate, so to speak, or I should say the more oppressed. We're all supposed to look out for the one under us, so to speak. Men should be looking out for women. Everybody should be looking out for Native Americans. A lot of folks, practically everybody should be looking out for Black people. This sort of thing. And then there is a sort of hierarchy to it. And there's where we talk about privilege and all these kind of things. And so, yeah, you kind of do, or I should say must, but you should. If you're really considering what it is to like allyship and brotherhood, you're really supposed to be looking out for the folks who got it worse than you.
When you mean, okay, I was gonna jump in because like when you're talking about helping these people out, to what level do you mean helping these people out?
Yeah, and that's what I need to know. How do I help somebody by giving up my sovereignty in a way I don't understand how it benefits? If I sit there quietly, how does that help you?
That's a great point. So, and I think that could be a discussion unto itself. Now, I will say this. I have people that have considered themselves friends to me, and probably if I use the word ally, they probably would align themselves with it. But through their actions and through whatever, and their leanings, political leanings, whatever, they are really not in any way, shape, or form allies. They just have not come to that realization yet.
Hold on, because I feel like I'm still asking you about me, and you're still telling me about thugs on the street corner. Me.
Okay.
How does me, when we all have sovereignty, in this case anyway. You have your complete sovereignty, whether you go Democratic or Republican or whatever, you choose. When I decide to become part of society, I choose that in exchange for certain things that I want, I give up certain rights. So I concede authority to the courts in exchange for them taking care of me. Well, Again, another conversation. So I'm asking the protest group, when I give up my sovereignty and let you decide how I show solidarity, what is the gain? Do we look more in unity when I'm doing something different than you? Do we look more like a unified force when I'm standing there quietly as you told me to? How do we as a whole do better when I have no input? You didn't even invite me to the table to come up with the rules. You showed up the day of, handed them to me. How does that make it better?
So again, I see a focus on centering. Now I see you focusing centering on like the perception and how, and rightfully so, because now it's about efficiency and productivity. How can it and effectiveness? So your aim seems to be, this doesn't seem to lend itself towards the overall effectiveness of the goal of the movement. Okay, that's a fair point. That's a fair position. I would say that there is also a need and a priority to center the folks whose struggle it is to begin with. And here's the thing about that. The reason why I brought up the lady who said you broke the contract.
Right.
And part of the reason, I mean, other than the fact that she articulated fairly well, the emotion and the passion with which she conveyed that, which is like, yo, we feeling this. And a lot of the folks, Black folks or whoever, they feel it. They feel it. And it's, again, feelings driven.
But that's my point.
And you have to protect those people.
I saw the 1.4 million views, but if I had to guess, that was her selling goods to the audience she already had.
I can't say that because I don't know.
No, I agree you can't say it, but what you can't say is I can post links of white racists who heard her talk and they're like, she done changed my heart. So what I agree with you, the passion was there. But for me, and again, it was very well put together. But for me, that was therapy. That was a therapy session, which I am not against therapy. So let me just get it clear. That's not a derogatory slant.
No.
That was for the people you already had.
I would disagree. Well, I would actually contend that. And I would say, okay, for you and also for me, as someone who in this particular round did not put boots on the ground, it did serve as a therapy. And she's like Dave Chappelle did. He spoke like you. I think I also avoided watching the George Floyd, the actual video of the murder, for, PTSD reasons. I just did not want to be like really affected. I couldn't like really take it on at that moment. And even though of course I'm abreast, I, had to shield myself. But then Dave Chappelle came along and he articulated so well with such a passion. I could not hide that feeling. So it was therapy in that regard. So yes, for folks that are sitting at home, that can serve as therapy. But what I'm trying to say is she's not the only one impassioned and feeling away. Like if the people when you're there and the people on the ground, let's in this particular case, the Black folk who's marching for the Black cause of the Black struggle, Black people getting killed, they really feel a way about that. And
but again, so what? There was a white leader, cop. He was head of I think it was the New York Police Union. I think
talking about the guy from the PBA?
Yeah, PBA.
The one who was basically yelling. He was basically like, "We're not criminals and thugs."
Well, that's my point. He was talking about himself. He had passion.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's keep it real in the field. The three of us, when we watched that, we was like, "Man, shut up." Right?
I was. You remember I sent you that video,
right? But did you see my point? The man told no lies. But we was like, man, I see you talking, but I ain't hearing nothing. I'm hearing nothing.
You know why we did that?
That girl, I can see a person saying, you know what, girl? You can get all caught up in your emotions. You can talk that talk. That was my building you burnt down. I didn't do nothing to you.
Same thing with the small businesses.
They got nothing for me.
Small business.
Nobody. And I actually say she and Chappelle are in two different worlds. She was saying things that were true and making sense. She was not dropping no hard logic. She wasn't making no far transfer, near transfer learnings or nothing like that. Even the cute little Monopoly game, that was just a passionate thing there.
Mm-hmm.
So she wasn't moving at the level that he moves at. Remember his last stand up, where at the end he said, "For the first time, I feel that I've been closer to white people than I've ever been before to white folks because I just don't care."
Right.
She wasn't hidden at those levels.
No, but see, again, total different level of responsibility. For example, Dave Chappelle that was, I don't know if you can tell, that was filmed on his property, which I think was the most G move ever. He basically rounded up everybody and said, yo, I'm having a little get together at my front lawn, and I come and I'm gonna talk for like 30 minutes. Just come. And how he dropped the mic and just walked off after like 30 minutes of people probably taking hours to get there and show up was funny. On the other hand, this young lady on the street was probably filmed with a camera phone, having no idea to the degree to which it would become viral, who the audience would truly be. So I would say that, and I'm not even really saying, again, to get back, to bring it back to the original conversation, this is about this guideline set of rules of engagement on the ground. What we're not really giving enough credence to is the degree to which, and again, you not being on the ground, you may not be aware, the degree to which infiltration and marginalization and co-opting of struggles is so rampant and so such an issue. So
but again, let's talk about what I can see. We agree I'm not on the ground. Let's talk about what you don't need to be on the ground to see. There is disorganization. Those same people you're talking about, they make excuses all day, every day about how they can't control everybody. Now, for the record, I think that's true. Humans are humans. But since you can't control people, stop pretending like you can. Anybody that was planning on doing something ain't going to read this and not.
The other thing, too, is that this is one of the biggest issues I got with this as well, is not organization, but there's no one single voice for the movement. And it doesn't have to, and when I mean one voice, it would be nice if there were clear leaders. I'm sorry to say, but if there were actually
I would be okay if there was 50 different groups.
Exactly.
A name for this thing for that group. Someone
exactly.
to put your name on it. Even if it was one person who wrote this, write Sally Jensen. Have the courage to say, this is Sally Jensen.
But the thing I could probably think as well is about that is going on. I mean, basically acting as a devil's advocate is that, I mean, pretty much the history of like how it's been with a lot of movements like these, where there's always been a single leader, and like those leaders usually get fucking knocked off. I mean, an example,
bro, cost of doing business.
Exactly, I agree. I agree, bro.
Maybe the crowd is.
I agree. I'm playing devil's advocate.
So if I may, I not to take your moderation job away from you, but if we could perhaps like move down the list and actually expound, and I think in doing so, we'll kind of round out a little bit more of our understanding and position about what this document is and what it's intended.
Because I feel we've been actually bouncing around.
We have.
Tell you what, let's not. I don't feel like fighting you on do not escalate things, so we'll skip that one.
Well, why not? Hang on. I don't think it's fair to just simply only cherry pick the aspects of the guidelines that you don't agree with. I would say no. For example, the one you said in the comment before we even had this talk, you said the get off your phone and do not post photos once.
That's
and
what
so,
I was going. That's
right.
That's a generic rule.
That's the whole point. It's like it goes against your thing. Now, what I think you're trying to say is if I can't go against all 6 points, I can't go against this. I'm going to say that's hot trash right now. I think I absolutely can, even if there's only one of them that was off. So, yeah, I mean, let's talk about that one since you brought it up. How are you going to have separate phone rules? Ain't nothing.
So again, I don't think. Now, again, we are now in the realm of guessing. But when I saw that, you saw that, like you say, like was Dave Chappelle getting at Killer Mike directly? Maybe not. In terms of get off your phone, do not post photos, I don't think that is just for white people to say it's okay for black people to do that, but white people don't do that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That one seemed like a generic rule.
Sorry?
That seemed like a generic rule.
Correct.
It says at the top. It's got brackets on the thing. It's bracketed.
But again, just because the whole thing is directed toward white folks does not mean that specific rule doesn't also apply to other people.
I see what you're saying. I can't assume because these are the white folks' rules.
And so this is the point.
Black folks
this is the point. The point is that is also
the question. Are you saying I can't assume they did not also print up rules for black people?
No, I guess what they're saying. And so again, in a different protest, this would be a different. For example, I'm gonna keep going back to Standing Rock or let's just say the Women's March. Now I like Standing Rock better. What would apply to me in this particular situation, it may apply to somebody else. Would apply to white folks in this situation, applied to me in that situation. You know what I mean? And I had to respect it and be down with it. And the point is that, like, the Johnny come latelys to the movement, it's not, it says white folks, but what it really should have said, to be a bit more egalitarian, is the Johnny come latelys of the movement. Ooh.
Okay, so that's actually getting to a good point here. What percentage of this movement do you think is the people who've all, like how you traveled all over? What percentage of you guys do you think you're the population of the world that's getting this attention right now?
And and you're lending yourself to my point. To me, a lot of the organization of this, the grand high level organization of this on the many local levels and the collective national and international levels, I don't think we at the table on this shit. I really don't.
No, I didn't ask you about leadership. I don't care about that right now.
Okay.
I'm saying there's 100% of the people out in the streets all over the world. You're talking about the Johnny come latelys. What I'm looking at right now, overwhelmingly, is the Johnny come latelys. Why this thing's getting the traction it's getting. They're adding to the volume of numbers. The diehards that have been protesting from nuclear energy sites to sewage and everything like that, I'm saying they've always been a small group. And if it was just them, we wouldn't be talking about this right now. So
yeah, it's the same thing. If it's
Johnny come latelys aside, they're the only reason this thing is as big as it is.
You know why you wouldn't be talking about this right now?
Because it's a small group and most people wouldn't be paying attention?
No. For the same reason why my former coworker from 16 years ago, who I haven't worked with him for at least 12 years, white guy, conservative out of Missouri, called me or texted me first like 8 times on a Sunday at midnight. And then we subsequently had a 90-minute conversation. He called me just because I'm that black friend whose opinion he respects, and he wants to talk about it. A lot of times people, when something is in your face enough, yeah, you're going to want to need to talk about it because now it quote unquote affects you because you're having to witness it or view it or be in your consciousness.
It affects him because Johnny come latelys are all over. Had it just been that one shooting in Minneapolis and just the people there did it and it didn't go anywhere, if it didn't go viral, he would not have called you. Did he call you for the shooting in Georgia?
He called me, I think, because there's protests happening in 50 states.
Did he call you for Gardner when he got choked?
Of course not.
That's my point, bro. He didn't call you because a terrible thing happened. He
I know.
Called you because of a reaction to a terrible thing.
I know.
So it was not and there was protest for Gardner, correct?
Yep. Yep.
Yes, but I like how you did that. Exactly. So the people who's normally out doing their thing, I agree with you, it's not them, but that's why it's getting the traction it's getting. This is a wider angle. So what I'm seeing is you can't have it both ways. If I don't know what you call the opposite of the Ready Charlies, whatever you call them, because call them the diehards. If the diehard was able to do things to a certain level, they would have done it at Garner. They would have done it then.
The other
I
thing
don't think that's fair. I don't think that's fair.
I'm sorry to say,
I don't think it's fair to just judge numbers and results and say, okay, well, these guys did this way and it's effective. And I don't think that's fair because there's a lot
there. I'm talking about outcomes.
Yeah,
I'm talking about the validity of intentions. You're trying to weigh evenly intentions and outcomes. I'm not saying you fight. I'm saying period. Outcomes are outcomes right now. Outcomes are happening. So there's no evidence to assume, no evidence. I don't know for a fact. There is no evidence to assume that the diehards could have done this by themselves.
They couldn't have. They couldn't. I don't think they could have. And
we don't think, but there's no evidence. There's nothing.
There's no evidence.
You're eventually saying that you have to open it up and things have to be more hospitable, if that's the right word, to the Johnny come latelys. If that's
I'll say it one more time. There's no evidence that you can do it without them. None.
But again, this is not about doing it without them. But again, back to the military example that you tried to push earlier. There are no real Johnny come latelys in military because you kind of all sign on, and once you're on, you're on. So it's kind of like
you're jumping at the wrong timeline. So People's Wars, take China. Started out unregulated, decentralized, but in order to actually achieve their aim, They had to become conventional. So even America did not start out conventional. It started out dispersed.
Can I say something?
So to Sam's point, it's okay to have it start how it started, grassroots, decentralized. But the reason why people like Sam are asking what they're asking, I'm not talking about the racist guy who watches Fox News all day. The reason why a guy like Sam is asking who is in charge and what's the plan is because history has shown eventually you have to cross over to conventional. If you're unregulated, people's protracted army, if your people's army does not become regulated, it will die. This is 1,500 plus years of, we're going to call it causes right now, but honestly, war is war, just different levels of violence. And war is politics. So for this to work, it has to become structured. Otherwise, which is the question that if we're all honest, we spend a little bit of time asking, is it going to do something long term? Is it going to die?
I can concede that, and I can agree to your overall point that for things to go to the next level, it will probably and likely need to shift from, say, I don't know if conventional is the word that I would use, and that's probably a discussion also to itself. But I agree that there's a transition that would need to happen from the grassroots diehard to the masses. So
Okay.
like the punk band, the punk band that goes commercial. Of Green Day before, everybody knew who they were. And then, and then the sound changes and da-da-da-da. I get it. Let's go back to the list and let's look at the items. You skipped over one that to me is probably the most indicative of the spirit.
Okay.
The second one that says, don't lead chance. How do you feel about that?
I actually thought you were going to take number 3.
I'm starting at the top. No particular order.
I think number 2 is completely stupid. If you want to start a song, start a song. I get to choose whether I sing to you or not, but who the hell am I to tell your ass you can't even sing?
No one said you can't sing.
It says do not lead chance. You're telling me.
Word, lead.
That's singing.
Singing. No. That's not true. That's not true. Singing, there's chants and protests all day long. There's always opportunity to sing.
You are okay. Hold on. No. Let's get mathematical here. There's a million ways to sing. A portion of those ways is leading the song. You are telling me a subset of singing. You're telling me I can't do. You're telling me you can do that kind of singing.
This is not about singing. This is about putting yourself in the front. It's like, for example, perfect example. I want to join the choir at my church, right?
Okay.
And I just joined this church last week, and I say, okay, well, I'm gonna join the choir. And their rules are, fine, you can come in and sing in the choir, but don't jump your ass down here and just jump in the middle of the song and start doing a solo. Similar rules.
Why do they say that? Why do they say that? Because they have an organization and a hierarchy, and they got someone they know can sing. They got a structure. This doesn't say don't lead the chants. We have our chant leaders. Because you don't got them.
And that's the thing. That's the difference between civil organization and every other type of organization that has that hierarchy. In lieu of having that hierarchy.
Logic? Because this is basically saying we don't got no plan, but we're going to tell you what to do.
And we're not. I'm not asserting this for the record as a perfect model of anything. What I'm saying is I understand what this is trying to accomplish in the whole. Whether we can again hash all day, agree or disagree about the line items, but the overall spirit, I completely understand and agree with, because
intention is, and again, we said it earlier, intentions versus outcomes. If you and the people that wrote it understand it, is that enough? Does it matter with the audience?
And then there's another piece. Because largely this movement, especially this particular one, given the size and the magnitude of it, especially compared to other movements, it's like white folks pulling out the one black guy that says whatever for Trump, or the one, the black, these cherry picked examples. We don't even know what city this was from, what organization it was from, or if this is even in play in more than one place.
So one thing I want
hold on. I can't let him off the hook on that.
Oh my God, dude.
None of that stopped you from sharing it, bro.
Okay.
Let's say I'm go. I'm just saying you give all these reasons why we shouldn't trust
No,
it.
I shared it because the spirit of it, I agree with.
Okay.
So here's my thing. So you're probably absolutely right about this because I mean George Floyd, it came all of a sudden. It's not like this was pre-planned. I mean, you can't guy got murdered. Afterwards, I mean, people were just like, hey, we just need to respond. We need to figure out something. This isn't like the civil rights movement where it was like, okay, we see the problem and we're planning this many, many months in advance, many years in advance. This is something that just came out within, like they reacted within a day. You gotta, and let's get back a couple years. Let's go back to Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, around the time when like we saw the first remnants of Black Lives Matter. It was still the same thing because before that there was no such thing as Black Lives Matter. There were a couple movements, but they were just random protests. And then people were like, after Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown, people got organized. That guy in the corner, that's one of my friends. He's just listening.
Okay.
Peace, brother.
Yeah. But the thing about it, yeah. So we but yeah, the thing about it though is that during Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown, it was a matter of saying, okay, hey, we gotta. This is an epidemic. Basically, using a medical term, this is an epidemic. This is something that Black people getting killed by unarmed black men, unarmed Black people getting killed by cops, primarily unarmed Black men. Pretty much going on into that. I mean, it was decentralized. I mean, the organization in general has been decentralized. I guess in this day and age, that probably works a little bit better, and especially with this protest jumping straight back to 2020, it works. For something that's this impromptu, I think it's a good way to work. But the problem is though that people have to roll with the punches. I mean, we have at Raymond, as we know, we got fragos, and fragos mean you have to keep adjusting fire.
I love that point, Sam. I love that point.
So so last thoughts on this, because I really want to keep it on the flyer. We kind of got on the cause. The flyer, given that you're disorganized, or not disorganized, given that you're not centralized, okay? Given that you're not centralized, does it make sense to hand out rules for a subset of people? Even if you want to take it from the point of view of, can you even regulate it? Does it make sense to hand out flyers for rules?
Question. Just to not to whatever, but just to clarify on a certain level, can we consider etiquette? Yes, technically we could say those are rules, but rules from the colloquial connotative sense tends to imply, repercussions, and which usually implies a hierarchy, which implies a system.
Can you say for such a diverse crowd that you represent the ethics of the movement? So a disorganized movement, you have the right to say you speak to the ethics of a movement.
Now you're touching on it. Now you've hit what I think you've wanted to say all along. And it's not about rules for white folks, whatever. Yeah, it's about who is the arbiter of the ethics in this particular case. And I would actually tend to agree with you to an extent on that, about the discussion or debate about who is allowed to be the arbiter. To be, again, I point back to the fact that a lot of the social justice organizations that tend to organize these things are usually not headed up or ran by these people. By the people who are,
bro. Let's pretend they didn't write this. Let's pretend someone other than them wrote this.
Why
Whether
should
it's them or someone else, do we think anyone has the right to co-opt the entire movement and decide the ethics?
Well,
I think you don't have to have one person. You should just have like
an organization, whatever.
So I wouldn't say that this is one person that opts to become the self-appointed arbiter and just come up with these rules on the top of their head. I think, again, I'll relay again that what I see this as a sort of like rolling guideline based on experience for folks who are largely putting boots on the ground in a regular fashion. And this is what they see. What they're trying to guard against is what they normally see. People, white folks coming in and they're all about like the selfie and all about the this, and they want to like take up space and they want to da da da, or they'll invoke or instigate, and they'll be less likely to be targeted by the repercussions, that sort of thing. That's the spirit of this guidelines.
Okay, so I think I hear what you're saying. You're saying that this is not a quarantine. This is recommendations for social distancing.
Correct. Based on seeing that folks walk around and they'll walk right next to each other in the grocery store and give high fives and cough each other's face and whatever else.
But why social distancing for some people and not all? Why not say?
Here's the point.
I'm sorry. One question. Can we make this shareable?
Oh, it's not shareable right now?
It's not shareable. I want to bring my mom. Like, I want my mom to see this because she's on Facebook. She's like,
"What do you mean it's not shareable? I've been seeing people come in and out."
I think that's on you to make that happen.
Right? On Facebook, it's not shareable on Facebook.
Oh, let's take a look. See here.
Got to make that public.
So just while I'm setting this up here, yeah, they do that. I forgot. They automatically make it that way. So hey, just for trade, just to stick with what you're saying there. So we use the analogy of quarantine versus guidelines. We've heard people say, "Well, I'm young and I'm healthy, and I'm not sick, and if I do get sick, I'll probably survive it. So why?" I should get a different set of rules. And we explain to them why. Yes, we understand it's a different thing for you, but for this to work for all of us, we all need to be the same way. I guess that's kind of how I'm seeing. I'm closer to your point now with the guidelines point, but I kind of see this as still a thing where it's better if we're all the same.
So I hear what you're saying, and yes, this analogy kind of does bring us closer, but where that analogy does kind of break down, what we're talking about in this case is, again, people fighting for their rights to individual agency, as opposed to here's something that's going on over there that affects these people over here, which you ain't one of them, but yet you're allowed to care about the issue that's going on over there that affects these people over here.
So,
okay. Myself.
Whoops, sorry.
It's okay. So yeah, people over there who are not necessarily tied personally to the issue, and yes, you care, and yes, we want you to care, and yes, the whole point is to get you to care. However, caring, and because again, what we're starting to see a phenomenon on TikTok is probably one of the most, to me, prodigious effects of this movement. Is all these young white kids that are challenging their parents. And you see all these videos of these young white kids going hard on their parents about their inherent racist attitudes. Hell, if white folks would just do that, we don't need y'all in the streets. I mean, that's my personal opinion. But again, but if you want to come on the streets, and if you want to do that specific form, and I wanted to say this in the beginning of the talk, I saw a wonderful sharing of memes. And that's another point. A lot of this education and this ideas and this ideology about various forms of the social justice movement, it is decentralized and sort of disconnected. But what I'm finding is my analogy, my saying is we're giving each other a little bit. We're all giving each other a little bit. We all have a little bit, and we're all passing that little bit of consciousness about the subject to each other. So one of the things that I saw was the set of memes that illustrates different forms of allyship and different forms of ways of contributing to the struggle, of which protesting is just one, And so it's like, fine, if you want to be an ally, if you want to be down with the movement, by all means, we are here for that. But this protest element of it, this on the ground movement, which has to do with PR, it has to do with being seen, it has to do with like, there's a image, not say image, but there's a perception element of the whole thing. And if you get up there and then when the TV cameras come and all you see is the white people on the camera for the black movement, it's kind of something to that. So the point is, for this specific avenue, because again, the protest doesn't represent all forms of allyship or all forms of contributing to the struggle. But the point is, this specific version, the specific model, the specific element may require some guidelines based on what we've seen in the past.
Now, one thing about guidelines, what I'll say in regards to that, this is why, like, I mean, obviously when this started, you couldn't do this, but with everything now that things are established, this is where I think, like, when people go out or when people change cycles, I don't know how they're doing they're rotating on the protest, but the way it should work is that people should be is that there should be a talk, like a general talk with the crowd, like people like, yo, this is how we're going to do things.
Right. They do.
And just lay out the ground rules just like that. The other thing though, in addition to that though, and I think this is already being done, is that if media wants to come out, there should be at least the POC, point of contact, basically to say, hey, I'm the guy you want to talk to for any media related stuff. I mean,
correct. But
hold on. I see we got people coming in now. So just so you know, anyone, if you got any questions or anything you want us to talk about this, let me know. I'm my first time running things, so now I am monitoring all the 3 threads. So we are running on Twitch, we're running on YouTube and Facebook. So I just figured out I have to watch all 3 of them in this centralized thing. But yeah, if there's something that we're missing here, let me know. I'm just looking at the comments here, guys, from people giving feedback on this. Let's work backwards. So I guess someone heard you, Trey, me coming at you for your feelings. Dominique, feelings are super valid, necessarily, and give life. To avoid this bypasses the process between thoughts and behaviors. Hey, we all agree on that. We all agree. We were just telling Trey that if he cries every time he watches Bambi, it's going to get a little awkward. That's all we was saying.
But I appreciate your supporting that with those thoughts, Sister Dominique. I appreciate that. I kind of wanted to what Sam was saying. What I get the impression is that both of you, but Sam particularly, I see 2 military guys that are a little bit fiending for that comfort of that hierarchy and organization, which just don't exist in this world. And you have to make do in various regards. And is it incomplete? Is it imperfect? Absolutely. But
see, I find that highly entertaining because you phrase it as if we can't handle the real world because the military. My experience since leaving the military is I handle the civilian world so much better than civilians because of the military.
So, I was going to say another thing too is that, like, if you look at like the civil rights movement back in the 60s, I mean, that wasn't a military organization at all.
But it had an organization.
Because like they were so organized.
And it wouldn't that's a wonderful example. And the reason now that's a great example. I'm glad you brought that up. The difference between the civil rights movement of the 60s and now is that there was a leadership, a somewhat centralized, and I would say centralized among different groups. You had your Malcolm group, your Martin group, your Garvey groups, your all that. However, it was centralized and there was leadership and there therefore was hierarchy, much more to the degree than there is now. So we're, I think, neglecting when we talk about the civil rights of the 60s, there was hierarchy, which is why we celebrate MLK Day. Why we, you know what I mean? Because he represented that hierarchy and that leadership that is now largely vacant.
Okay, we all agree on that.
And that's what I mean. Even without a centralized leader, what you do need are multiple points of contact. You need people that are like think about like a board where you have like a group of CEOs or a group of business people that are working together and they're basically trying to get the same common goal. Those people come up with all the rules and stuff and basically say, hey, like, these are going to be the throwing things back and forth. These are going to be what we're going to do.
Those people exist. The difference is you will never get these people, like, for example, in this particular movement, Black Lives Matter. I mean, Black Lives Matter is an organization, but then take the other 100 other organizations and trying to say, well, it'd be a good idea if you guys kind of all powwow out and had points of contact and y'all network, shared ideas, and came to consensus about certain ideologies, guidelines, rules about the shit. That would be, again, that's what I mean about being a military guy, kind of fiending for the hierarchy structure. Like it's not like that. First of all, though, a lot of those organizations I was pointing out are run by people that are not personally tied to the struggle. It's a business for a lot of the people. Like social justice is also a business. So there's that.
I understand that. But the other thing too is that it's not just for that, but the other reason why you want it is so that you can separate yourself, so you can clearly show yourself as separate from certain elements that you don't want. I mean, like because I know that there's some elements out there that we already know that you don't want to be associated with. I mean, part of that are some of those guys who are just straight up looting who are looting and rioting and doing all sorts of shit like that. The other people you're talking about, the white supremacists, even the Antifa elements. In addition to that, you got guys who are straight up professional criminals. I mean, some of the PDs were saying this, like they're fucking cartel guys, fucking infiltrating shit, and trying to use this as ways to basically push their shit.
You missed this, Sam. You weren't on yet, but I was talking about in Miami, one of the organizers of a group who is setting up the bail fund for folks here in Miami. She was outed by the press for having ties to the President Maduro of Venezuela. So it's like, we really don't know who's who in terms of running the show or what their real alliances, allegiances are, and what have you. And that's the state of affairs.
So let me say this again. So people are predictably irrational. People are people, okay? There's what we'd like them to do. There's what they should do. And then there's what people actually do, okay? So I guess my point in saying this is people, when they come together, they create networks. We've been talking about the pros and cons of a centralized authority where you can pass information up and down efficiently. You can control actions and behaviors and communication. But the detriment to that system is you only have one or two sources of information, which is why in combat in Vietnam movies, you saw they aimed for the officers. You take out the officer, you have confusion, no one knows what to do. With this, what we're seeing now, it is disorganized, but what we're seeing, it's exponential. It went from one city to the whole world in less than a week, right? By day 7, we were having riots outside of the U.S. So
I would say exactly riots, but protests all over.
Let's say protests. You're right.
Actually, one thing we
have protests all over the world within, for sure, 10 days. So my point in bringing it up is a controlled process. You can control it, but it's linear. It's going to have a linear growth. So inside Minneapolis, that was pretty linear how things went. But once it went viral through the internet, through social media, that went exponential, okay? That went exponential. And that's when you're like, how do we go from one city to 100, I think the last count I saw was 140 cities in the world.
Including, and we hit about 5 continents.
28 countries and 50 states.
Because we hit all 50, because the protests hit all 50 states. It hit countries in South America, ones in North America outside of the U.S.
You know, it was
Asia, it hit Europe, and it hit Africa.
Right, there you go. You know what was the most interesting one of the whole thing? Yeah. Paris, Amsterdam, Berlin. Great. Africa, Ghana, for example. Now, here's the interesting thing about Black Lives Matter protests or protesting police brutality in Africa. Police are black. Now, that's not to say that certainly there isn't like corruption, malfeasance, heavy-handedness in terms of enforcement. Definitely. I am probably just as scared of police in Africa than I am of in America. At least I can guarantee that when I'm in Africa and I'm stopped by police, I'm probably going to get held up for some money or something.
You also have to consider another thing, though, about that, is that when you're talking about protests in areas such as that, it may not just be about police brutality in that specific area. They're more in line to be solidarity-style protests, basically one saying, I support you.
Fair enough.
You ask what you're struggling with in America, and we're here we're here to protest in solidarity to you.
But you know what's odd about that? What's odd about that is, given, like, for example, Ghana, who had a funeral for George Floyd, arguably to your point, in solidarity. Okay, fine and well and good. You've not seen this degree of organization by those folks to this degree, probably maybe even since, I'm just talking smack maybe, but since their independence.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, because to be honest, for any movement, like, it doesn't matter what race, doesn't matter what creed, group, whatever, this is the biggest movement protest I've seen anywhere in human history.
Which is why,
I think part of that is social media.
Which is why I'm a bit distrustful of it. Not, I'm a little bit skeptical of it for that reason. It's a little bit too organized, too quick, and too whatever. I refer to the pallets of bricks that were showing up at just about every major protest site in the country.
So when it's too organized, that's what it's suspect.
Are you talking about like conspiracy theory, crisis actor type stuff?
Hold on, before he answers, I'm switching the whiskey. Go ahead, bro. Answer that.
Go ahead.
But yeah, conspiracy theory, crisis actor, because there's been the whole running joke. I don't know if it's a joke. We don't know. I'm not ruling anything out. But the whole concept of the pallets of bricks, I mean, pretty much the quick mobilization of rioters that are professionals, because they're actual professional rioters. In addition to that, there were so many things that were going on that were looking so organized so quickly that you'd almost think that this was like a planned action.
Let me give you another piece. Granted, and I also look at the trajectory of all. You could say that this is the tipping point, and that would be obviously the simple logic that people employ to say that how we get here. That, okay, because how many deaths had just happened in the 2 weeks prior? We literally had about 7 deaths 2 weeks prior that were national high profile. We had not even finished jogging for Ahmaud Arbery yet. Look how that was just literally like less than 2 weeks prior, and the movement. I mean, there was a concerted effort that we're going to do something about this. We need to talk about this, but the move was we're going to jog, and that turned into like a couple more deaths, and now it's like, oh, now it's a worldwide movement. That's a little interesting. It's curious.
So you got a critical mass thing I'm thinking you might have here. So with anything, again, going viral, we've been talking, 2020 has been kind of crazy. So 1 minute we're talking about viruses going viral. Now we're talking about information going viral. So I guess what I'm seeing here is what was different. Technology moved the movement faster than the movement could have moved itself.
Hey, the other thing too is just, I want to address some of these questions on the side, because we got a couple.
We got some. What we got?
Yeah, I want to first.
I see it.
Yeah, that was the one I was looking at. Exactly.
So this is my boy Juho. So Trey, you got another infantry guy.
I was going Finland. Yeah, so pretty much I'm not a law enforcement officer, but I do have a lot of friends that I went to officer school with that are in multiple police departments. I've got some friends that are special agents in the FBI, but the ones that I know that are that are actually in police academy, it could take them anywhere from a couple of months to about 2 years. We don't have the police academies we have in the US for being a regular beat cop aren't as long as 3 to 5 years. Some of them, and they can vary. Like if you're just a city cop, if you're a sheriff, if you're a state trooper, state police, that'll adjust on the length and also the requirements for getting in. A lot of them require different things, such as background checks, psychological evaluations, obviously criminal record checks. In addition, usually for a lot of beat cops, it only requires you to have a high school degree. And I think for a lot of special agent and state trooper jobs that requires a college degree.
I think kind of dodges what he's asking. The actual time to become a police officer.
Oh, why does it take so long?
Well, I think what he meant to say was, why is it such a short time here? I think last time I checked, the average amount of time to become a police officer, it's like 800 hours.
There's a set of memes that are doing comparisons based on, for example, it's saying that in Florida, to become a beautician, a cosmetologist, you need something like, I'm picking a number, like 1,200 hours, and to be a cop, you need like 700. And they're doing all this.
That's across most states. One of the licenses that requires the most time is beautician and stuff. And they say because of health reasons. It makes sense when you think about it. And again, that doesn't count law, medical, and stuff like that. But the point is still valid, where people are like, someone to cut my hair has to know about alcohol and diseases and stuff. But a guy with a gun, that's the point people are trying to push.
But the interesting thing is, though, that like when you look at it, let's go back to the military on this one, because it takes even less time to train someone to be a fully trained soldier. Let's look at the example of the standard.
Oh, bro, I can't believe you fell into this chest trap.
I know and this I know because I was an infantry platoon leader. So like just recently, the U.S. Army extended their basic training to 21 weeks. Before that, it was 9 weeks. It was 9 weeks for basic training.
You know, historically, it's gone back and forth, bro. It's gone 17, shrunk down to 13.
Yeah.
It's going back and forth. But let me just say this, just so you know, you were absolutely right. I think it got as low as 9 or 11 weeks for basic training.
It did when I came in so to give you an idea, when I came in 2006, it was 9 weeks it was basically 9 weeks to become a regular. It took 14 weeks to become a regular infantryman. So like what you do, you go to basic training for standard basic training for 9 weeks. You do specialized infantry training for another 5 weeks. And then after that, you go to your unit and you're ready to deploy.
So that's it. I will say this though. Let's just take our Joe Private. Joe Private, even if we turn him out in 9 weeks, you know what we don't do? Send him out doing movement to contact on his own. We don't send him on missions on his own. We don't send two Joe Privates. We don't send Private Joey and Private Snuffy out to do reconnaissance alone.
Absolutely
That's
right.
the difference.
I get what you mean, because the whole thing is that when you're talking about Joe Private, normally he's working in a fire team. That's like 5 guys. When you're sending out a cop,
when we're doing with cops, they're doing the same amount of time. They're doing the same amount of time, but they are going out, and this is where I side with cops. They're going out there on their own, bro. They are getting 9 weeks, 11 weeks, whatever. They're going out there on their own saying, here's a radio. And yeah, you give them a gun, but that is crazy to me. Could you imagine taking our average private and putting them out there on the field by themselves?
And to me, this is a talking point for why I advocate the defund the police movement, because a lot of the roles and jobs that really should be for more let's just call it community health services that the police are often tasked to be responsible for, really need not be in their hands. And it's really the reason why a whole large percentage of the bad engagement, let's call it, with law enforcement tends to happen. Them responding to things that it's really not for the police to do in the first place. I love you guys, but I'm sorry, like I actually hit my drum circle starts at 4 p.m. So I'm going to have to leave on that note. But I thank you guys so much for being a part of this. And this has been a great discourse.
No worries, man.
That's not a problem. Good talking with you, man. I'm going to try to see if I can get someone else in here, too. Stand by. I'm going to try to see if I can get some police to do in the first place. All right.
So we got nobody to defend the other side now. Oh, you muted yourself, bro, in case you didn't know that.
Yeah, I know.
I tried. Okay, so I think so. I don't know if we really answered your question, Joe, but I guess the shortest way we could maybe answer is I argue that there is a belief because a good percentage of your a good percentage of your police actually have higher level education. I am thinking that we as America, we believe that higher education translates automatically to a higher level of maturity. And that's a whole nother statement or thing we could look into, but I'm thinking that's what it is, if I had to guess.
Yeah, he just said that we did answer his question.
Okay, good. We nailed it then. All right. Let's see. So he asked about the police. I saw one earlier I wanted to talk about.
It was the one from Harris Malik. Buddy of
Yeah,
mine. This is becoming too funny to watch. I can't bring it to the front.
Oh, that's the whole point of it, my man. People are people. Let's see here. Anarchy is not the answer. Well, anarchists wouldn't agree with you there, Harris. Let's see. There was another one I was looking for. Someone was asking about, here, I think I found it. Okay. Yeah, okay, let's do this one.
Bring it up. Bring it up.
Okay. So we're talking about putting the fist up. You got a black fist. The imagery of a white fist up in the air. First impressions, what do you think?
It's kind of mixed. Here's the deal. Like if you're trying to like do some, so I kind of get why it's listed in those ground rules. And the only reason why I say that is because when you think about the Black Power fist, when you're trying to show it in an article or show it in like something that's going to be seen by the rest of the world, you want to show that like that as being I'm guessing Black Lives Matter, they want that to be seen by a black person. It's just publicity reasons. Primarily publicity reasons.
But your first gut, if you walked down the street and you saw a poster with just a white fist, what's the first thing you think? What's the first thing you see?
I mean, you just think. Me personally, I don't think Black Lives Matter. I just think people may be supporting the cause.
So if I was walking down the street, I'll say mine. If I was walking down the street and I saw a poster, or even a picture of some white kids putting their fists up. So let's say it was actual people. Okay, let's do that one first. A photograph, I would just assume it's just protesting, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. I would assume it's a regular
something like that. Now, if I saw an artist representation of a white fist up like this, if I saw that, honestly, bro, I would think that's just some kind of leftist agenda. That's it.
Exactly. I would think it'd be like an Antifa protest or something.
I mean,
and that's really the thing about it.
It connects to those things to me. I would not put it this way. Me thinking it meant white power, it's actually at the bottom of the list for me. I don't know.
The thing is that white power wouldn't even use that because they don't do stuff like that. That's not really their thing. They got other shit that they do. They do Nazi salutes and fucking other bullshit.
And in fact, I mean, even before I thought white supremacy or something, I would be thinking like, oh, just some white people at a concert, you know?
Yeah, that's what I think. I would think with either a concert or leftist protests like Antifa.
Yeah. So let's do this. I'm saying you're either soft left, you're trying to save some trees or some whales, or hard left, you're trying to save the proletariat by killing all the bourgeoisie. You've been reading lots of Tolstoy and Lenin, or you're at a concert. That's my list.
Yeah, and that's why I think, like, now on the other hand, on the flip side of that, now if you're having like if it's a picture where you see a bunch of like mixed fist, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, then I would think like this current movement, because I would think, hey, there that this is going for a common cause. These are all
and I can't let go of my point or my stance here. I think that's what we should want, you know?
That's what I think we should want. We should want also, because when you have everybody like in a combined effort, it basically shows, hey, that we're united. Because you want to show, because the thing that you want to show to, it's not to the pub. This is not to the public. I mean, actually, not. This is to the public. But what I mean is not as PR, but what you want to show to people looking from the outside is that this is a group of people that are united in one cause, one voice, one purpose.
Yeah, so the opposite voice he left, so it's now getting beat up real bad. Let's see if we can go look at the other ones. What were the other ones we didn't go through? Let's see here. Get off your phone. Do not post. Actually, let's go down the line. So do not escalate things. So I understand this one. When we incite law enforcement, it will disproportionately harm Black folks and POC. So basically, this is saying we get treated better than others. I completely understand this one. This is the equivalent of me as an American saying they're going to treat me better because I'm an American. So let me go out in front. Completely hear that. So I don't have an issue with this one. Honestly, I think this is the only one that I'm good with holistically.
Hey, I'm gonna have to dip out, man.
No worries, sir.
Hey, it's been good.
So,
we got to do this.
So I would just say this to everyone still following and listening. The idea here is, I think what we took from this as a whole was, this is a grassroots. It's not as organized as previous times. Technology has allowed that to happen. So given what technology provides, things go faster. They get bigger. That's awesome. The problem, though, is you're excited because it went viral. But in that excitement, there's a cost, and there's always a cost. And that cost is you don't get to control the growth. You don't get to, when something goes viral, it's an exponential curve rather than linear. So because you have this exponential curve, you can't use linear approaches to controlling it. So actually, I'm finishing this book here now called Exponential Organizations. And it talks about how technology has become this disruptor, whether it was Apple or Uber. They're just decimating industries to where the traditional ways of trying to manage things on that linear fashion with hierarchy and organization, you can't keep up. You just can't match it. Here's a great example. There was a company based out of Finland called Nokia. Some of you may or may not remember Nokia. Nokia was a powerhouse in the telecommunications industry. I think at the height of it, they were worth about $160 billion. They had so much money that this was the forefront of going after GPS inside phones. So this was the play. Nokia bought a company. I believe the name of the company was called Navstar, Navtech, do something like that. They bought this company for $8 billion. This company was the controlling operator of these sensors inside the road all through Europe. So that was the idea. They were going to buy this company. They now own the sensors. So they're going to run that information through their phone. So if you want GPS, you got to go through Nokia. Pretty smart, right? Made the buy, yeah, $8 billion. Unfortunately for them, they didn't realize That at the same time, there was a Israeli company coming up by the name of Waze. Now, this is probably 2.5 years before anyone would ever, at our level, hear the word Waze. But Waze was also going after the GPS market. But Waze had a different approach. Instead of trying to control sensors in the ground, Waze said, why don't we just leverage all the phones that are going around? So here's what you have. You have, let's call it a CapEx company. Navstar was a CapEx company. They were trying to control the road physically. Just think about the money you have to put in to maintain the sensors. Sensor gets broken, you got to tear up the road, you got to check it, you got to maintain the sensors. Waze, they just worked on the software. They didn't own any of the cell phones that everyone carried. Also, as people got better phones, Waze carried none of that cost. Have we upgraded phones all the time? Waze, you got a better phone, they got better reception, responders, they can upgrade the software. So I don't remember the exact numbers, but again, Navstar had these sensors throughout most of Europe area, and let's say it was 500,000 sensors. Just think about the number of phones that are moving around Europe with Waze inside them. Long story short, Waze becomes big, gets bought by is that Google? Yeah, I have a feeling someone's going to be coming back behind me checking all this. I think it was Google for around 1.1, $1.2 billion, or was it Facebook? They got bought by one of them for 1.1, $1.2 billion. They then, and so they got bigger, it was absorbed in. Let's talk about Nokia. I told you that at their height, they were worth about $160, $180 billion. Well, within Waze taking over the way they did, it kind of made those sensors in the ground obsolete. So Nokia's telecommunications arm ended up getting sold for $7.8 billion. So the stock plummeted so low that the entire company, that portion of it, ended up getting sold for less than what they bought Navstar for. So I think there's a couple tech lessons to take from this and extrapolate it to what's happening with the movements right now. The first one is CapEx over OpEx. When you have physical things, they're liabilities. Uber does not own any of the cars. OpenTable owns none of the restaurants. Amazon, until recently, didn't build any of the products. The movement right now doesn't have, officially, forget the George Soros talk and all that, but they don't have a whole bunch of people on payroll, okay? It's just random people choosing. No one's forcing you to show up to meetings. There's no travel for meetings even how we're talking here right now. So technology has removed the necessity of geolocation, or simultaneous locationing. We don't have to be in the same place at the same time even. Most of us weren't there we weren't there on that street in Minneapolis the day that George Floyd was killed. But it doesn't matter because with digital persistence and technology, if you choose, you can watch it at any time and be there in that moment, right then and there. What you've probably maybe seen these memes on Facebook where they talk about some actor claiming how they've died. Whether they actually have died or not, it just keeps popping back up. This is a thing in social media where it moves through, it dies down, then it comes back. It's like reverberating effects, like an echo almost. We're noticing that the more connected we all become, there's new behaviors of information to where historically, who controlled information to the masses? Just think about it. Who controlled information to the masses before? It was the governments and it was the newspapers. If you wanted to talk to the people as a whole, you had to be in advertising or publishing, really. Publishing first. Or be a government. We're going to skip all the steps, but let's talk about today. Today, we all have the power of governments from a century ago. We can all put out a blast to the world. In fact, I argue we have more power. We can go instantaneously. This decentralized control has resulted in a power of the people, power to the people. And I further go by saying that what you're seeing here is, how are we going to handle this? This is still relatively new for us. This level of capability of interaction and interactivity. How do we choose to employ it? You heard us talking about this flyer today, and you heard us talk about the fact that we don't know who made it, how many of them there are, or even what city it's in. But here we are talking about this flyer, and this flyer is moving all over the world. So there was probably more digital copies of this flyer sent out than there were physical copies of this flyer sent out. That is the power of digital media. So this awareness of what do we do with this information? Do we just ignore it because we don't know? Or do we become humans and we notice the things we choose to notice and ignore the things that maybe are discomforting for us in that fashion? You've heard my piece as a military man, as a Black man who alleges to be woke or aware. I am not a fan of this list. Sing what you want to sing. If you can lead a chant, I don't think that's something you can choose to do. If you got the ability, you got the ability. Lead the chant. You sing like garbage, you're going to be sitting there singing like garbage by yourself. As far as escalation, I'm good with that, but that's for everybody. That should just be protest etiquette in general. Don't escalate the situation. Regarding allies, we didn't get into that, but I think that's not something you can tell someone to do. I'm that kind of person. You can tell me to put myself between people who wish to cause harm and people who desire to cause harm. I'm okay with that. You don't got to ask me. I do not support just telling people point blank to become that position. I am not of the belief that every man has to be a warrior. I am not of the belief that every man has to be a fighter. I think that's what makes life beautiful, that those of us who are built and choose to fight, we're here. And then the men who choose other things, they're there. I sit here with books looking through paintings. I can't paint. So I appreciate that while I was learning how to use a rifle, another man was learning how to use a paintbrush. I really do appreciate that. I appreciate while I was learning combat maneuvers, some guy was learning how to make a suit, learning how to make a shirt. I severely, sincerely, and severely appreciate that. So no, I don't feel comfortable telling all white people be our shields. I would rather, hey, who wakes up every day praying that someone would mess with them? And when those white guys raise their hands, I got a job for you. And maybe that's a bigger point here. It's not really a race thing. Nonprofits and community and social engagements, I talk about this a lot, where they believe because their cause is so just, they don't have to operate like a business. I think it's a big misnomer calling nonprofits nonprofits, because I think some people are convinced that if you're a nonprofit, you don't have to know anything about money. Little secret for you folks, even nonprofits need to know something about money and business operations. So when we're sitting here talking about the idea that we're just going to tell all the white people to be body shields, it's not insulting to the white folks. It's inefficient. Imagine I have a nonprofit and you come to me and you say, I want to help, Ray. I see what you're doing. And I say, great. Go clean those stoves. Go paint the fence. There's nothing inherently wrong about that. But what it would have been better if I had asked you to tell me about yourself. Maybe you're an accountant. And I say, we pay quite a bit of money to a corporate accountant. He doesn't really give us a break. He gives us a little thing, but it's still pretty taxing on us. No pun intended. It would be kind of nice if you maybe did our books for us, filed our taxes. Is that something you're willing to do? Or are you wanting to do something other than your job? That would be a better approach. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a cause that I wanted to be a champion for, and I've showed up and I said, hey, my name is Raymond K. Roberts, ex-military. I'm a strategic planner and a data scientist. And they look me in the face, they go, oh, data science. Wow. So you know math and numbers and analytics and models, and a strategic planner. So you know how to put things together. Go paint the fence. Now, I argue I'm like most people, and in the moment, I will go paint that fence. I'll paint the whole day. What you should be asking is, will I be coming back? And I think if you talk to nonprofits or social causes that do such things, you'll find that, yes, your diehards will come back. But those are the people, no matter what you do to them, they're going to come back. Most people, that doesn't work. Because what you're telling people is it doesn't matter who they are or what they are. What matters is you. They're just fodder for the cannon. You could accomplish the same thing by asking. I mean, just think about how we could have rewrote that. We could have said, for individuals who so choose, it would be appreciated if. For individuals who desire, it would be better if. That would be so much more positive and instructive, and I wouldn't be able to go at it. But you just deciding, if you're white, I think that's the reverse of a South Park episode or the South Park movie. Remember the Operation Dark Shield, Operation Hide Behind the Darkies. You remember that? That was basically the reverse option of that. This flyer is Operation Hide Behind the White People. It's crazy to me. I'm looking, so that's why for that one, I was like, it's not the intent, I understand. But there's intentions and outcomes, and we need to be able to be adults and talk about the fact that they are not beholden to each other. I could intend to come across as a sophisticated guy, but it's completely possible that the outcome of someone is like, this guy is an alcoholic, which would be true, but I digress. There's intentions and there's outcomes. Let's talk about these last two together. They both deal with media in some form. One is people-controlled media. It says, get off your phone, do not post photos. And the other one says, do not talk to the press. So more centralized traditional media. This falls into the bucket for me of things that should be for everyone, if that's what you care about. And I'll tell you this. Yes, white supremacists will target you, but white supremacy is a form of racism that I call sharp racism. So you may or may not have heard of the term sharp pains and dull pains. A sharp pain is like a stab or a punch. It just happens instantly. A dull pain is chronic. It's constant. It's lingering. It's just it doesn't go away. Even when you go to sleep, it's still there. That's a dull pain. Long, not as intense, but longer in duration. Versus a sharp pain, short period of time, but very intense. So a white supremacist is a sharp pain. You don't get sharp pains very often. More predominant with racism is the dull pain version of racism, the constant and continual. So I wouldn't be worried about a white supremacist hunting me down and killing me and my family so much as a dull pain racist getting me fired, refusing to hire me, refusing to allow me into school, saying that I'm too much trouble, not allowing me to, not socializing with me. I remember this, I was part of this cigar club, and I started getting more vocal about these kinds of issues. And I was also very busy. And one day I get a phone call from a guy, and he's like, "Hey, Ray, what happened? You don't come to the cigar club anymore." And it was then that I realized I don't come to the cigar club anymore because I wasn't getting the invites anymore. I had just been dropped off the list. Again, no one wrote out to my house. No one called me names. I just was quietly just removed from the list. So when I look at that, even how they point out police and white supremacists, sure, keep police, but if you're going to talk about racist, just talk about racist. You took a small subset, and that's not the subset that engages most of the African Americans who are up in arms right now. Regarding talk to the press, that's half-hearted. If you're going to tell them not to talk to them, you should be telling them who to talk to. So I think you see above where it does say direct them to Black organizers and protesters. And again, I to my friend's point earlier, you see it here where it says he made the point that, okay, it's not as organized. Ray, you can't treat them like a military organization. I get that, and I completely agree. But there should be a balance of rights and responsibilities, or maybe better, guidance and feedback. So this is giving to you forward, but a whole list of things not to do. Should have a little balance, what to do. Don't do this, do this. Don't do this, do this. Don't do this, do this. It helps people better navigate situations. So coming back to balances of feedback, feedback loops. Imagine having a boss that only tells you after the fact what he didn't like. Now, you're able to improve, but is that the same as a boss that tells you ahead of time what he wants you to do? Even if they get you at the same time, is it the same? The idea here is the net effects on you as a person, the interactions between you and the other people. They matter. We keep using that word a lot these days. What matters, what doesn't matter. I argue that while I have personally said things like your best boss or your best boss teaches you just as much as your worst boss, you still prefer the better boss. And I think that's maybe what we can take from this. There might be a way to insist that you were treated better, that your people are treated better. And when engaging your allies, demonstrating how you would like to be treated. So, talked a little network theory, communication theory, got a little down to outcomes versus intentions. I argue that these are the same tools that technology and data and social media is leveraging to build these powerhouse companies. And we're seeing the people through open sourcing leverage a lot of these things, well, open source or free. I am amazed at the power that the public is demonstrating, that is the public is leveraging. I'm not saying I agree with everything. I'm saying I'm in awe of what's happening. I find myself very fortunate to be here during these times in history. But I believe that we haven't even touched the tip of the ice here. I think there's much more room for us to go as a group together. As we're now more connected, we can learn more from each other. We can engage each other more one-on-one, or in this case, many to many. And I think sky's the limit. This is not the peak. I don't think this is a false peak if you think this is a peak. I think it's only going to accelerate from here. We got to remember that a good majority of the adults right now in the world, this capability wasn't around when we were the age of a lot of the protesters out on the streets right now. I saw someone on Facebook my age. He was talking about how we were the first people on Facebook. We were that first cohort. I mean, we weren't at Harvard, but we were in the first years of cohort where you had to have an EDU to be part of it. Those first couple of years. So, shoot, we still remember AOL Messenger, Instant Messenger. So we knew a time before all this, and I believe a lot of us are adapting to it. But I'm excited to see what the next generations, how they take this to the next level. So I thank you for those who listen today, talking about this flyer and how it relates to technology and culture and design. Please share your thoughts. Appreciate you for listening, and expect us to be doing this weekly. Enjoy your day.